Hello, everyone. I'm Shireen Shahawi. I'm the Executive Director of the Friends of the Kotzschmar Organ, and I'm joined today by James Kennerley, Portland, Maine's Municipal Organist. James, we thought during these social distancing times that it might be fun to start a new series for you called Ask Him Anything. I know James gets a lot of questions from audience members, and we're collecting those, so send them to us if you want to, and plan to have James answer a few every few weeks. If we can't be in the concert hall with you, except for our backgrounds, as you see, we thought we could be on a screen with you. So let's just get started. So, hi, James. Great to see you live and in person.
Great to be here.
So we did get a few questions. We have gotten a few questions, but I think one of the ones that people keep talking to me about, because a few people heard it, but not everyone, but you tell such a wonderful story about your audition to be the municipal organist, and I would love it if you could share that with people.
Yeah, well, the Kotzschmar organ was one that I grew up listening to as a kid. I had a tape recording, and you know, in those days, which is kind of dating me to a child of the 80s, I would play this thing over and over and over. And my favorite track was at the end of the second side, I guess the B side, which was the Vidor Toccata. And so I would, you know, play this tape, and then it would get to the end and it would have this thundering organ sound. And of course, I didn't know where Portland necessarily was. I didn't know what Maine was. This was when I was growing up, of course, in the UK. But I grew to love the sound of the organ, and especially the look of it. We had a beautiful picture on the front of the pipes, you know, the pipe facade. So I thought it looked really lovely and it sounded fantastic. And then, you know, skip forward 25, 30 years, and I moved to the States, and I was working in New York City and heard that my predecessor, Ray Cornell's, was retiring. And so it just seemed natural to apply to the position. And so we're going to skip forward a few months from that. I was accepted into one of the shortlists, came up to do my interview, which was great. I had been to Portland before, actually, with my wife, Emily, and she had her best childhood friends who grew up in Portland. And so she had a wonderful, strong associations with the city, though I don't think she'd heard the organ before, which is terrible. She's heard it loads of times now.
Forgive her. Forgive her.
Yeah. And so I, you know, turned up to the organ, and I prepared a number of pieces I thought would work really well. The Kotzschmar organ is like an orchestra controlled by one person. And most organs have some feeling of that, but most organs, if you like airplanes, they're like little Cessnas. So they're like, you know, propeller planes or twin propeller planes, maybe a jet engine. The Kotzschmar organ is a jumbo jet or a Concorde or something even more fantastical than that, a fighter jet. It really flies at Mach 1 or Mach 2. So I wanted to specifically choose music that would work well. It would take a lot of time to set it up and register it, as we call it in the organ world, setting up all of the sounds. So I got there bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, and I, you know, got into the building. I was shown in by one of the custodial staff, sat down, and I tried to start setting up the levels. And of course, it didn't work because there was a special code that we have to unlock them. So there I was setting up all this stuff and thinking, oh, I've got 2 hours to do this. About 45 minutes of music in 2 hours, which is normally we would have, you know, 4 or 5 days to do that in an ideal world. And I'd never played the Kotzschmar before. I'd heard it, but never played it. So I sat there trying to work all this stuff out. Then, thank goodness, one of the organ curators came in and said, oh, yeah, you just press this and this and this. So I was able to start saving all those combinations I was setting up. So I kind of raced through the whole thing and played my audition, which was an amazing experience. It was really like a mini concert for about 10, 15 people that were scattered around the hall. I couldn't really see anyone because it's such a huge space. And so they just blended into the woodwork and stuff. But it was a really fun experience. I think if I did that now, I would gain a whole load of gray hair and lose about 10 years of my life. But back there 2 years ago, I was young and foolish, and I just did whatever it took. So that's the long and the short of my audition and things. But here I am. So obviously something went well.
Something worked well. I think a little bit. It was a unanimous decision by that search committee. So I think you must have knocked their socks off.
Paid them off.
Knocked their socks off, which we'll get to later.
Definitely.
I do have a question from one of our very loyal fans, and
yeah.
she did ask this, which I think you can speak to, because I know you love the Kotzschmar. I know you loved it as a kid and you love it now. And anything played on it is quite beautiful and lovely. But do you, as a musician, think that there is a piece that was almost built for the Kotzschmar? Like, is there a piece that you think just Kotzschmar does it the most justice?
Yes, I think I've only been playing it for the last couple of years, barely. But of the hundreds and hundreds of hours that I've already spent on that amazing instrument, and an instrument is kind of like a partner. You have to get to know its ins and its outs, its good days, its bad days. And the more you discover, the more you realize you don't know. So in my humble 2 years of those hundreds of hours, it's probably the Candide Overture, which is a fantastic orchestral overture to the Broadway show Candide by Leonard Bernstein. And I played it on my first concert. Candide is the sort of farcical comedy by Voltaire, and it's set in France in the 17th century, I think, 18th century. And it was set to music brilliantly by Leonard Bernstein. And this overture has, like most overtures, has lots of the themes. So it kind of condenses all the best melodies and things into one piece. And I arranged this, we call it transcribing in the organ world. So I took the orchestral score, the clarinets, the bass drum, the violins, the trombones, the flutes, and condensed that in so I could play it with my hands and my 2 feet. But I found that every sound I looked for, every combination of sounds, if it was violins, the oboes, the woodwinds, the brass, the big percussion that happens at the very beginning, all of those sounds were right there on the Kotzschmar organ. And I've played it in other places, and you just don't have that. So I would say of all the pieces I played, it's orchestral music and definitely that transcription of a Candide Overture that works the best.
Wow, I would never have guessed that, but that is so cool. I'm glad to know that. I'm sure the people who were at your first concert are really excited to hear that. So,
yeah.
So here's another question, and I get to see you backstage. So if I don't see any of this when I see you backstage, but before a performance or even at intermission, do you ever get nervous before a concert? And if you do, how does that manifest itself? Like, is it in your stomach? Is it your head? Is it your body? Is it whatever? But again, I will say, having spent time with you backstage, I never see a difference. So I'd be very surprised to hear that you get nervous.
Yeah, I must say, when I perform, one of the things I just love about performing on the Kotzschmar is that I don't get nervous. I think it's partly to do with the fact that I have the time to be really comfortable with that instrument. Often as organists, unlike a pianist or a violinist, you can take your instrument with you. If you're a violinist, you play a standard key, piano size if you're a pianist. And if you have your standard Steinway Model D concert grand piano, well, there are variations between each instrument and between the hall that you play in. But I would say 95% it's going to be the same as if you prepared that at home on your piano, or even if you had a different piano to the Steinway. Now, pipe organs are completely different because every organ, even the dimensions, if I put my hands here or here, we're talking about, 30 seconds of an inch, 64ths of an inch. But when you're practicing, you're getting used to building in a muscle memory. So the more time you can use that muscle memory on the actual organ you're performing on, the better. So I think one of the reasons I don't get nervous on the Kotzschmar is just because I have the preparation time. And it's also in my nature, when I get tend towards getting nervous, I tend to actually get excited. So the idea, it seems pretty bonkers, but when you're in it, it sort of makes more sense. The anticipation of going on stage and the gratification that all those people sitting there, they've come to hear this amazing instrument, this superb music, and maybe, the performer. But normally I think of myself as a vehicle that all of that stuff moves through, almost like a translator. And the organ is literally that, because the wind starts, outside, it gets pulled into the mechanism, it gets pushed through the pipes, and it's like this moving, this amazing stream of sound that we just get to control the starts and the stops and the ons and the offs. So I think it's that I get super excited rather than nervous. We have such an amazing fan base in Portland, and I have the privilege of having all that time.
Absolutely. You know, you definitely have you have people who love that organ, certainly, and they love you, and they've loved, they loved Ray Cornelius as well. I mean, I think that there's
Yeah,
a real family feeling around the Kotzschmar, and we often say in the office, it's your Kotzschmar organ, it's your organ. Portland, it's your
yep,
organ, or Maine, even, it's your organ. And I
yeah.
think,
It really is. It belongs to the people. It is the instrument of the people. And as you say, we're always trying to remind people of that. This is not some sort of nuanced, very niche musical appreciation for a bunch of very specific people. This is an instrument and a hall and a whole sort of concept that was designed literally for maximal enjoyment. The whole population. So it's always good to remind people of
I
that.
know, I don't think everyone understands that the organ is owned by the city, and it's been there since 1912, and it was the center of entertainment in the early years of its time in
Yeah,
Portland.
yeah,
And it really does belong to the city of Portland and to the state of Maine. And
yeah.
it's quite extraordinary that way. But, all right, let me ask you a couple more questions, and then we'll wrap up for today. But tell us
Nice.
about the socks. I said something
Oh boy.
about knocking people's socks off, and I think you do knock other people's socks off when you show your socks. Tell us a little bit about why you do fun socks at concerts.
So I always grew up wearing fun socks and fun ties. It's when you're especially when you're doing concerts, there's a fairly formal dress code that a lot of musicians grow up with. You have your tuxedo, or your white tie, your black bow tie, and so to get some personality into that mold, you only have a few options. You can wear some kind of headgear or some kind of crazy glasses, or I don't know, rings or something. But a fun way to make that happen is by wearing colored socks. But and so that's one reason. But the main reason is a much more practical one. And it was about 10, 11, 12 years ago now, for 13 years ago, I was doing a concert, and it was in like a lot of these concerts in a dark, dimly lit church with an amazing pipe organ, but the light was terrible. And they were videoing it because the organ console was away in the gallery, and they had a big screen down out at the front so people could watch what I was doing upstairs. And the videographer said, well, this is great, but you're wearing black socks, black pants, black shoes, and we can't see your feet moving on the pedals, because as organists we use our fingers and we use our toes and our heels. And I said, well, I don't know what more we can do about that. In a video you need more contrast, so blacks against whites, etc. And I said, well, I'm not going to wear white socks because that would look very trashy. But why don't I wear some colored socks? So I think I went and grabbed some bright red socks or something. And from that point, I thought, well, it's a good thing, in a practical way, to wear colored socks so you can see the feet and it registers on the TV, the projection screen. But then it became almost, more of a shtick. And so it's a nice way to just be fun. And now, of course, I have loads and loads and loads of socks. Some, with lobsters on them, and with beer bottles and music notes and the faces of J.S. Bach and Mozart. And so it's developed into a really fun thing.
Well, and I know you even have fans that bring you socks. Some of our loyal patrons will find me
Yes.
and pass them to me to pass to you, which is always
it's really cool. And actually, I think for our Christmas concert, some very, very sweet patrons bought me the pair of socks that I was wearing for the show. And they said, I recognize those socks. And I was like, yep. So they make their way onto the stage.
That's awesome. I love that you are able to do that. Because I think, I think anyone who's seen, well, hopefully people who are seeing this video have been to one of our concerts, and they know that we put that big screen up on the stage. So that
Oh, yeah.
Even though you're right on the stage, your back is to everyone, but with the big screen, we can, and having a camera on your hands and a camera on your feet, people in our audiences know that you are more than often than not going to have very fun socks on. So
Right.
it's a good tradition for us. But I'm going to ask you one more question, and then we'll wrap it up. But then I will say here, and I'll say again at the end, if you have questions for us, we are both working from our home offices. We're really not in Merrill Auditorium. And we're hoping people will send us more questions, because we want to stay connected to folks that love the Kotzschmar organ and love seeing James play it. So let's do a little plug there, and I'll put a little plug at the end. but I'll ask you one more question and tell us about the shoes, because they're very specific shoes that you wear.
They are. Yeah, when I first started learning the organ, my teacher said I had to have specific shoes, and I can't exactly remember what happened, but it turned out that I just used my socks instead. You know, you take off your street shoes, you don't want to get all the grit and things on the organ pedals. They're made of very beautiful, you know, polished wood. So I would just play with socks. But then I got to a certain point where that was not going to work any longer. So I was sent to a dance store, a jazz store, where they sold like ballet shoes and all kinds of dance shoes. And so they said, what you need to get, they're called jazz shoes. They have a very soft heel. A very soft toe area. It's just, you know, leather, suede. And then the heel is built up so that when you're playing, if my hand's going to dissipate, you have a tall heel, so you push down your heel on the pedals, and then you push down your toe, so you can use your heel and your toe at the same time, kind of pivoting the foot. So you have 2 feet doing that. You can get a lot of notes in. So I actually, part of my show and tell, brought one of my organ shoes. I have about 5 or 6 pairs of these things because I go through them like nobody's business. So this is built by a company called Organ Master. I kid you not. There is a company, I think they're based in Vermont, that just makes pipe organ shoes. This is probably their most classic design. I would model them for you, except my feet are under the table. But you see, they've got very soft leather on the top, and especially soft leather underneath. So I can actually feel with my toes where I am, kind of like doing a braille type thing on the pedals without having to look. And the most distinctive thing is the big heel. So that is probably an inch or so tall, that has suede underneath. So then when you're pushing those notes with your heel, sorry, my background is making them disappear. There we go. When you push with my heel, it kind of pushes the note down to that. So those are the organ shoes. These ones will be destroyed in probably another couple of weeks.
So you sort of started like with the Capidios, right? The ones that
yeah, exactly.
Okay, now I get it. That's very cool. Well, I'm going to let you go because, believe it or not, we have work to do even after this interview.
Right.
But I'll make you come back in a week or two. We'll collect more questions. I hope people will send some in, because a few of these came from people. Some were me, because I really wanted to hear the story of the audition, because I love hearing that story. But thank you, James, and thank you.
Such a pleasure.
Today. You know, stay connected with your Kotzschmar organ. We're trying really hard, even though we can't be in the hall. So track of us on social media, our email list. We're trying to send good vibes to everyone as they're going through what we're all going through right now. So be well. Thank you, James.
Thanks, Shireen. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.